So, temporary suspension of transit service starts Sunday. As part of an ongoing response to COVID-19, Mayor Drew Dilkens ordered the temporary suspension of Transit Windsor operations effective the end of normal operating hours on Sunday, March 29th, 2020. The suspension of operations will last at least until Monday, April 13th, 2020. The city says that this action represents a precautionary measure to help safeguard the health and well-being of transit riders and operators alike, and to further help lower the risk of community infection within the city of Windsor. I recognize that despite the health warnings and advice, many in our community still rely on Transit Windsor for their daily needs, says Mayor Drew Dilkens. But the risks associated with COVID-19 outweigh the inconvenience this shutdown will cause. As the seriousness of this global pandemic continues to become apparent, as Mayor of Windsor, I plan to do everything within my power to protect the health of local residents. Transit operations will continue this weekend to ensure that those residents who were planning to use public transit to acquire essential goods can continue to rely on this service until end of day Sunday. Enhanced cleaning measures have been in place for several weeks and will continue in the days ahead. I'm sorry. I think this is absolutely ridiculous. I understand taking precautions during COVID-19. I can understand, things like shutting down non-essential businesses, shutting down non-essential workplaces, and at least the provincial, territorial, and federal governments across Canada have been good at creating compensation plans for people who are going to suffer from unemployment as a result of business shutdowns across Canada during COVID-19. I agree with them shutting down non-essential businesses. I agree with the social spacing, telling people to stay 2 meters or 6 feet apart from each other, telling people not to go out unless absolutely necessary, and telling people to, wash their hands and sanitize their hands frequently, and to sneeze and cough into their sleeve, into their arm or elbow, as opposed to their hand, or opposed to not covering their cough altogether. I agree with the majority of precautions being taken. But shutting down transit service, to me, that is too extreme. Obviously, this Drew Dilkens has forgotten about the essential workers in Windsor. People that work at supermarkets, people that work at drugstores, people that work at Walmart stores, at Giant Tiger, which is like a small version of, for people outside of Canada who are not familiar with Giant Tiger, they're like a small version of Walmart. People that work at Dollarama, for example, which is a dollar store that sells items for $4 and less. They're like, I guess I could compare them to the American store Dollar Tree. But Dollarama has been declared like they're an essential service. You have restaurant workers, you have people that work in hospitals, people that work in the medical field in general, people that work for delivery services, delivering essential goods. You have lots of essential workers that rely on public transit to get to and from work. You have people that don't have a vehicle or are unable to drive that rely on public transit so they can go and do their shopping for these essential products, so that they can go and go to medical appointments, so that they can go to the laundromat if they don't have a laundromat, if they don't have laundry facilities in their own home or in their own apartment building. Basically, you're attacking the most vulnerable people in society, people who have no choice but to use public transit, that might not have the financial means to get from A to B another way. You're attacking them, Dilkins. Like, that's a real dickhead move, Dilkins. And I think that's absolutely stupid. I agree with taking precautions, but shutting down transit service I think is ridiculous. Thankfully, I haven't heard about any other communities in Canada canceling transit service as a result of COVID-19. I have heard about communities cutting back on transit service. Like, I live in London, Ontario, Canada, which is about 200 kilometers or 120 miles from Windsor. And yes, some of our some of our transit service, some of our transit routes that are not essential for the time being have been canceled, and some of our transit routes that are less busy than others, they've had their frequencies reduced or even their hours of operation reduced for the time being. Fine, I can understand that. And I understand about social spacing. And I see what you're saying about the risk to transit operators and passengers. But you know what? You cannot completely eliminate the risk of COVID-19. You can reduce the chances of getting it, but you can't completely eliminate the risk of it. Like, for example, what London Transit and many other transit companies in Canada, and I'm sure in fact around the world, are doing, is making it that able-bodied passengers, have to get on and off the bus through the back door of the bus to observe social spacing as much as possible when they're on the bus, and that the only people that can get on through the front of the bus are people that are not quite as able-bodied, such as senior citizens, disabled people, people that are injured, people with small children, pregnant women, people that are not quite as able-bodied. They're still allowed to get on through the front door. And, most transit companies right now are being extra vigilant in terms of cleaning their vehicles and that kind of thing. I agree with those kind of precautions. But shutting down transit service and victimizing all transit users within your city, shame on you, Mayor Drew Dilkins. And just to prove my point, to show that Windsor is not some small town of 5 or 10 or 15,000 people. Windsor is a city of 217,000 people, according to the 2016 census. It's a fairly large city within Ontario. So I'm sure there's a good number of people in that city that require Windsor Transit service to go about their daily lives. Drew Dilkins, you're an idiot. Shame on you, and I hope the people of your city remember what a moronic move you made the next time that a municipal election is held in your city. I can tell you that if I lived in Windsor, Ontario, or I could vote in the Windsor, Ontario election, I would not be voting for Drew Dilkins. And I hope that no one else living in Windsor, Ontario decides to vote for Drew Dilkins during the next municipal election, which I believe is in October or November of 2022. As soon as you have the opportunity, get Drew Dilkins out of Windsor City Hall. He does not deserve to be the mayor of Windsor, Ontario, or any other city for that matter, in my opinion.